Neil, would you mind just advising, well, I can do it. We're actually recording this meeting, so we can put it up on our website for the public availability after the meeting.
Cool. So just remember that, people, if you're dressed inappropriately, are you videoing it as well, Sue, or just the voice track?
No, just recording.
Oh, okay. Righto. Young's there. Gary's there listening in. Linda, you're there. I've talked to you. Louise, you're joined. Thank you. Martin, you're there. Rebecca Williams is there to provide some support in case we have any technical issues. Stephen, you're there. Thank you. Sue Smith is our organiser, and then via the phone we've got Stuart Calder and Herb.
John Sparks.
Bert Kemp, is it? Right.
That's right.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry about that. I don't know what I heard from. Sorry about that, Bert. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll just go through the formalities first of the panel itself and get the meeting underway. Please, everybody, just bear with me, and if you do want to speak, probably the easiest way, do the best. I'll try to make sure that we get everybody on when we need to. So welcome to this meeting of the Secretary District Hearings Panel, the first ever under a Microsoft Teams environment. And the first item on the agenda is 20.6.1, which is to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of March 2020. Can I have either Stephen or Martin to move that, please?
I'll move that. Yeah.
Thank you, Stephen. Second to Martin.
Aye.
All in favour? Aye.
Aye.
Carried. Thank you. And our first item on the agenda is 20.6.2, which is a proposal to grant an easement over Alexandra Waterfront Domain Reserve and Innscrew Road. Just some procedures to go through I need to check off on. This is a properly convened meeting of the hearings panel, called for the purpose of hearing submissions in relation to an application for an easement over a council recreation reserve. I'd ask the Minute Secretary to report on proceedings to date.
All statutory requirements under Section 95 of the Resource Management Act have been complied with. Report of planning consultants has been circulated to address for service. The submissions received have been identified in the report.
Thank you. The following procedure will be followed for this hearing. The panel or officers may ask questions. Council officers or its consultants shall put any questions through the chair, and the chair shall be deemed to be the person asking the questions. The applicant or the applicant's representative shall make submissions and present evidence. The submitters or their representatives shall then make submissions and present evidence. The applicant shall have the right to reply, but shall not be permitted to again traverse the evidence nor raise new evidence. So before proceeding with the hearing, I'd ask that all parties appearing identify themselves. So I'm just going to run through to make sure I've got them, rather than let you go through all. So first of all, can I confirm, Stuart Calder, you're there as the representative for the applicant?
Yes, I am.
Cool. Don Sparks, you're there as the applicant?
Yes, I am.
And then we should have, as a submitter, is Bert Kemp.
Yes, I'm here.
Have I missed anybody out? We were expecting Stu Millis. He was there earlier, but he seems not to be there anymore. So
I'm just going to phone him, Neil.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Sue. I'm not going to wait. If you can work that through, that would be good.
Okay.
Okay, so having done that, I want to make some observations at the start of this process, because it's quite different for the hearings panel. It's not the normal Resource Management Act one we do. So while we're using that process as the hearings panel to work through the application and hearing of from the applicant and the submitters, there's also some background that's important, I think everybody understands. So I just want to make some observations about that, and in particular that the application that the panel is considering, we're doing under delegated authority from the council, and that is the role that we have. So we're not hearing anything to do with any subdivision, potential subdivision, or related activities arising from any future subdivision. It's solely in relation to whether the council will give approval under the Reserves Act that has been delegated to the hearings panel. I'll make the observation that the actions of the Vincent Community Board or advice given by elected members are not matters that we necessarily need to have regard for, other than they are part of the background to the hearing today. The report that we have before us is not the typical Section 42A report. It is simply a report from an officer of the council. Linda Hoskins is the statutory manager of our statutory land portfolio, and that report, I think, is fair to say a clear and concise report that assesses the application against the Reserves Act as it's required to do. And it's against the Reserves Act that's been considered and not the Resource Management Act. I think with that, to set the scene for going forward, we'll use the process we normally use for an RMA hearing, but that's the extent of that. So on that basis now, can I ask from the panel for someone to move that the report of the, I should use the appropriate title, the report of the Property Officer Statutory be taken as read. I'll move that. Someone like to second that?
Did Martin second that or not? I didn't hear.
No, Stephen did. Oh, Martin did. Okay, right. Martin did. All in favour?
All right.
Carried. Thank you. So with that, I'm going to hand over to you. Is it you want to lead the charge for the applicant, Stuart, or is Don doing it?
No, Don's actually do it. I'm sort of more of a witness, as it were, expert witness. So yeah, I think if we hand it over to Don.
Okay, all right, cool. Right, we'll hand over Don for you to present your submission. Now, bear in mind that we have received all of the documentation you've sent. I don't think that you need to read it all to us. It's important probably just to make the key points that you want to make, and then pass over to Don. To Stuart to support you. So you happy with that?
I guess so, Neil. It would have been easier for me if I had read the report. Just then, it covers it all. But it's your call.
Well, yeah, I think that we can spend a lot of time as you read it all, but the evidence has been produced prior to the meeting, and I think the key thing would be for you to point out to us the key observations you want to make, and we might have some questions.
I guess everyone will have the report and has read it. So I think that if we look at you've caught me off balance a bit in terms of not covering the report, but
well, no, please, if you feel comfortable, what I want you to do is to make sure that the panel members understand what you want to make sure we understand. All I'm saying is the preference is not to read the 3 or 4 pages that we've got from you in full.
Yeah. Well, really, I guess that if I'm not to read the report, I would assume that everyone has read it, and that would be good. Just to make a few comments around that, the staff report refers to a granting of a right-of-way as a last resort, but I haven't been able to find anywhere in the Reserves Act where that is stated. I'd suggest that the staff interpretation of Section 48 is not correct, where it refers to materially affecting the reserve. If you look at Section 48(3)(a) of the Reserves Act, materially affecting the reserves really refers to whether you advertise it or not. And I'm sure that you would agree that if you were to receive approval to grant a right of way, there's no way you could actually construct it unless you materially affect the reserve. Another point is that the report refers to there being plenty of sections available in Alex, and I strongly believe that that's not correct. If you look at Trade Me this morning, you'll see that there's one section in Clyde, one in Alex, and 53 in Cromwell. And in my report to the Vincent Community Board, I provided facts around numbers of sections available. So it is important that we get behind developments and really for the benefit of the town. I'm doing it to make a bob.
Unknown participant is now joining.
Stuart.
Sorry, Don. I assume that was Stu Millis joining. Stu, just to check, is that you?
Yes, it is.
Oh, all right, that's good. We're just listening to Don Sparks speak to his submission. So, Don, just carry on, please.
The reason I do this is because I enjoy it and there's potential to make a bob. If I were to go along with the council preference to develop the existing track, then I'm creating a dangerous situation. And if you look at the argument of making money versus creating potential risks, then making money is not important. Really, beyond what I've said then and what's contained in my report, is I can't really say more than that. Clearly also the alternative accesses suggested by the staff report are simply not practical.
Thank you. So the panel members now will probably have some questions for you, Don. Can I just lead that off, please? You mentioned at the start about section 48.3, and I'm just trying to find the reference to that in your report, and where you were saying that was back to the staff report. I'm just a bit confused by that.
The staff report says in two places that it is important not to materially affect the reserve.
Yeah.
But if you look at section 48.3A of the Reserves Act, those comments or those words really refer to whether you advertised the proposal or not. So clearly constructing a right of way would materially affect the reserve, and so you have to advertise. It's not so, and you couldn't develop a right of way without doing materially affecting the reserve. So we know the Reserves Act allows for the granting a right of way. To construct it without materially affecting the reserve would be impossible. So the meaning has been, I believe, misinterpreted by the staff.
Okay, an interesting observation. I'm not quite sure. Not so sure I follow it or necessarily agree with what you're saying, but I don't think we need to have a debate about the whys and wherefores of the interpretations.
I think if you read that section, Neil, you would follow it.
Yeah, well, I have, and that's why I say I'm not going to get into an argument with you about the interpretation of it. I don't see it saying how you see it that way. I take your point that in granting a right of way that there will typically be some impact on the reserve, but I don't know that it's your interpretation of 48.3 solely relating to advertising is quite correct. But I don't think there's anything to be gained by working that through.
Do you want me to carry on there?
Yes, but yes.
Well, Stuart, if you don't mind, I'd just like to get some questions from Don first and then go on to you, if that's okay.
Yep, sure. Yep.
Don, I just want to make the observation that a lot of your submission is around sections and the availability of them and the need and those sort of things. And I guess what I want to make and reinforce is that for what we are considering today, I don't know that is necessarily a consideration that we need to be taking. Our consideration today is solely in relation to the Reserves Act and whether the right-of-way can be granted or not under by the council as the authority that administers that reserve. The issues around the need for sections or not are not necessarily, I don't think, a factor that we have to take into account or should take into account. And certainly in our deliberations we'll have that conversation, but I'm not necessarily convinced that that is something that is relevant to the decision. The decision is in relation to the provisions of the Reserves Act, and the Reserves Act doesn't talk about whether you need sections or not.
Yeah, I accept that. It has been, the reason I commented on it is that it has been raised by the staff.
Yeah, and I think that I understand how you pick up from that, and I guess the report, the way I looked at the staff report, was saying that it has tried to differentiate between what can be done through a subdivision process and the need for sections, as opposed to simply this process, which is strictly about the Reserves Act. Martin or Stephen, do you have any questions of Don?
I have Don Martin here.
Yep.
Can you just expand on your reasoning behind not accepting the alternative access? Is your reasoning based on the fact you would lose a potential section, or physically? I've been up and had a look at the site yesterday, and I just wanted to explain why you don't think those alternate access points work for you.
Yeah, certainly, Martin. To answer that, it is clear that that access track is south facing. It is clear that it is totally shaded, and it is clear that it's vulnerable to slipping. You only have to drive along Edgeley Road to see that. Now, if I create an access track along there, it's clearly going to be a skating rink in the winter. And if I'm that irresponsible that I would create that with the potential of the public, a child, for example, going over the bank and landing on Edgeley Road, then I'd suggest that that's me. I would be irresponsible.
What about the other? There was in the officer's report. There was a map, an aerial showing two other alternatives.
In my report, if you've read it, Martin, you'll see that that area is to be retained. The area where those tracks are going through are going to be retained as the artist retreat. And there's no way the owner of that section would allow tracks going behind or in front of the house to achieve access for a subdivision. It would simply wreck it, and they just wouldn't allow it for the right reasons.
That's Henderson House you're referring to, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. That's me.
Thanks, Martin. Stephen? You're muted, Stephen. You have to unmute yourself, Stephen.
No, I'm comfortable. I think those questions satisfy me. I was unsure about all these access points, and now I'm quite clear.
Cool. Okay. Thanks, Martin. Don, do you want to hand over to Stuart now?
Yeah, if I could, please.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Don. Yeah, just want to reiterate a few things there. First of all, I sent some information through with quite a lot of photos. Has everyone had access to that? Would be my first question.
I certainly have. I even printed them out.
Good man. Yep. So they've been circulated. That's excellent. Look, I just need to talk to those to a certain extent. So, first of all, if we look at Appendix Z, which is an aerial photo taken from the GIS showing services, that's showing the existing stormwater. I just wanted to address the submitters on the stormwater issue. What have I got here? The GIS shows existing stormwater mains, which are a 600 diameter concrete pipe discharging to the northern side of Poplar Grove, running down towards the river, which is away from the three submitters' house. Any construction of a right-of-way on there would capture, as part of the engineering requirements, would capture quite a lot of that water coming off that hill and funnel it via a new sump directly into that 600 mil pipe. It wouldn't be going to the existing sump, which occasionally blocks at the top and overflows down towards those sections. So I think as far as the stormwater flow off the reserve, what we're proposing to do will only be of a benefit in that respect. Regarding the underground seepage, which has come up in the reports, I think that's a separate matter. We're not going to strike that coming up on the hill, I would have thought. And I know there's a report floating around from Peter Greenwood that the water loss from Rains Dam has now been rectified, which is obviously helping. And I also believe that talking to a water leaks guy, that there's been a water leak above this in Hart Place, which has been leaking for a long time, which has also been recently rectified. So the submitters will be able to advise if they've noticed any difference in underwater flow. Now, with regards to access, as you can see in those drone photos I've put through, particularly photos C and D, that's a photo looking down at the white with a black roof Henderson house, and you can see a driveway directly in front of that or directly beside the house. We don't deem that to be a practical solution to get to the site for a subdivision, and therefore the only other practical site is that track, which due to some major slippage, which is also shown in one of the aerial photos, photo photo B, you can see there's quite a lot of slippage in there, and from a safety point of view, but also from engineering, it's going to be quite an expensive fix to get something there. Plus there'll be, obviously there'll be quite a lot of disturbance to Earnscleugh Road while that was undertaken. So the Reserves Act doesn't say that I can see, if no other access is available, then you can grant the reserve. It's just a practical approach I think has been taken, and it's the same approach NZTA take as well when you're trying to access onto a property from the highway. They'll only give you access if there's no other available options that are practical. With the reserve, where the proposed right-of-ways to be constructed is actually on the south side of the reserve. So from the Reserves Act point of view, I don't think we are taking away any value from the reserve. And in fact, as a proposal, we propose to form a walkway or footpath along one side of the right-of-way to the top of the right-of-way, which is virtually at the top of the hill, which gets the great view overlooking the river and the bridge. And it's only at the top of that right-of-way that you can see the value of the reserve. And at the moment, it's all rocky and overgrown, south-facing, just rubbish land at the moment as it is. So I think in that respect, that changes the whole application. And given that the community board and no other submissions other than the stormwater issues were brought up, obviously the public's fairly comfortable and doesn't see great value in the land. The property officer's report, I think this addresses their concerns by, at the developer's cost, providing a walkway for the public, and we can put signage up at the bottom to advertise that effect to council specifications, and so therefore it's bringing a public benefit and using the reserve in a sense in the way that it's designed to be. I note the ODT and the CO News advertise it as a 6 metre wide sealed corridor. It'll actually only be a 4 metre wide sealed plus the footpath and a 6 metre wide easement corridor. What else have I got here? Under sections 40, 41 and 17.1 Reserves Act, the creation of the public walkway to the top of the reserve improves enjoyment of the public for the scenic part of the reserves, namely the northern facing slope. All they see at the moment is a cold, scrubby, overgrown south facing slope. And just reading down through my notes. And yes, I believe that the addition of the walkway for the public to the ends of the right-of-way meets the needs and intentions of the Reserves Act 1977 with the significant advantages of improving access to a public resource at little to no cost to council. So putting the subdivision to the side, I think by putting that walkway in, we meet the requirements of the Reserves Act, and I think under that, council should approve the application. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Corder. Concise as always. Did you want to talk about your historical example you mentioned just before I ask you another question?
Yeah, it is partly relevant. A bit like the case. Yes, the one down in Roxburgh, that was one that was landlocked land, and there was a thin slither of council reserve land that run through the middle of it. Because it was quite narrow, there wasn't a lot of practical use. I'm sure that influenced council's decision. But I just wanted to say that it's, by granting a right of way over a recreation reserve, it's not an unheard of thing in Central Otago District Council. That was just what I was trying to bring the panel's attention there.
Okay, yeah, thank you. The similarities probably stop and start about there, and I think the case in Roxburgh was the historic nature of the arrangement as well. That goes back, I think the report said over 100 years potentially. It does make some sense. Okay, thank you. I guess my question comes back, and Don, certainly by all means, if you and or Stuart want to answer any of these questions, I think it's appropriate that you either both can or do, depending on who wants to have a crack at it. The issue that seems to stick to me in terms of the Reserves Act talks about the public's freedom of access being one of the issues under 17.1, and in particular that what I make the observation is that the moment you put a driveway or an access that looks private, even though it's on public land, it all of a sudden becomes very private and difficult for the people to use that reserve as they might be otherwise able to do it, because they feel like they're going up someone's driveway. So do you not think that is an impact on the public's freedom of access?
Not necessarily. I mean, the walkway doesn't have to be tacked onto the side of the right-of-way. As part of the agreement, the walkway could be, there's actually an existing track that you can see on aerial photos, which heads further. I mean, we've kept the proposed right-of-way as close to the boundary and away from the centre of the reserve as possible to minimise any effect. But after the start of the right-of-way, you can see there's actually a track that cuts up the middle there. I mean, we could form, whether it's gravelled or whatever, form a public path up there to the lookout spot at the top, which is, quite separate. And as I say, as long as there's a public sign at the bottom advising, look out or whatever, public access, I don't think that I don't think having the right-of-way would necessarily affect it in that sense. And also where the right-of-way is, as I say, is on the cold south side of it, so it's really the useless part of the reserve. So I think we can get around that one. What are your thoughts, Don?
Well, clearly, a right-of-way doesn't change ownership. It doesn't change public use, and there's a lot of talk about perceived. Surely, when people, if you put a sign at the bottom, or you see people walking up this footpath or up the road, no, I don't agree, Neil, that it creates that. And there are other examples of it, and the public use it. So no, I don't think so.
I guess the other examples, well, there's one that Mr. Calder's presented, obviously, where clearly there's an access strip across what was a closed road, I think, in days gone by, where no physical construction has taken place, like a driveway, which is quite different than this proposal. So I think we have to look at it in terms of what is proposed by the right-of-way. And it's not necessarily apples and apples. For what it's worth, the other one that comes to my mind is the Cromwell Golf Club. When the June subdivision was done, there's a public access easement being provided. Sorry, an access easement being provided through the reserve of part of the golf course to the private part of the golf course in the back. And you'd argue that, given that it was a golf course, it had no impact on the public use or access, because it's already been provided for in terms of the golf club, and the access was already there anyway as the access into the golf course. So they're the only two examples that I'm aware of. What I am aware of, though, is further to my point before, is that if you get the opposite situation, and I'll take Brittany Cove at Pies and Moorings as being the example, where there is public land in front of private residences, and the proposal was to put a cycle track on the public land. The adjoining landowners, it could be said, portrayed their objection to that on the basis that their private outlook and enjoyment and experience of that public land was going to be affected by that track. And that's why I make the observation that you get the similar situation where a private use of public land, even though other people can still use it, supposedly becomes difficult. And around the shores of Lake Dunstan, there's other good examples that where neighbours have grassed the area between their land and the lake edge. And I can tell you that if I was to go and sit down there and have a picnic, those people would make me probably feel quite uncomfortable, and I probably wouldn't do it. So that's my reason for the observation that when you construct something for a private benefit over public land, then in effect what you've done is you've taken that extent of what you've developed into a private use, and that I would say the average Joe public would have difficulty in using or seeing it as being theirs to use. And that's the logic of the observation I made.
Yeah, I suppose, Neil, that we could advance examples day and night. Have you been to the property?
Yes, I know the property quite well. I've driven past it often. I haven't been on it physically, but I know it quite well, and it's a good thing with technology. You can see it quite well, and the photos that Stuart Ford has provided are very, very helpful as well.
So you will have seen that the amount of use made of that reserve so far?
Oh, listen, the use of the reserve, I have to say, is actually not relevant necessarily. The fact is that it's got a reserve. What would help a hell of a lot, to be perfectly honest, is if the council had a reserve management plan for the reserve. That is not helpful in this case, because if it had a reserve management plan, then the uses for it could be better defined, and may make this application easier or harder for that matter. Unfortunately, it is not uncommon for councils throughout this country to have reserves that they administer where there is no reserve management plan. I would expect that out of this application, regardless of the outcome, one of the items that will be going onto the council work list will be saying, prepare a reserve management plan for this Alexandra Waterfront Domain Board area. So, that the same in the Roxburgh example. There's a recreation reserve down there that I would suggest that most people don't even know is theirs to access. And if they do access it, they don't know it's a recreation reserve. It's just a piece of land that they go onto, and no one stops them, so they keep on doing it. So, yeah, unfortunately, the perception or the use is not that relevant. But having a plan would be quite helpful, and certainly whatever recommendation, whatever decision we come to, one of the observations we'll make is the need for a reserve management plan to be developed, as council should for all its other reserves. But matter of priorities and other things, I think, gets in the road of that, and we'll leave that to the chief executive to deal to in due course.
Yeah, yeah. I suppose it just comes down to, as well as that, the public good that we would be providing by providing that walking access at no cost to council to make use of the reserve, balanced against the effect of having that, what you're deeming to be materially affecting that public perception of having that formed access up the side. As far as future, just to be clear, Neil, are you is something that's reflected in your decision making that when that gets developed up the top and there's some people overlooking that reserve, that if council in the future want to do something with that reserve, those people will try or may try and object to anything that's happening? Is that
No, definitely not. No, that's not a consideration at all. The issue I'm raising is simply about the fact that when you provide a private arrangement over a public facility, rightly or wrongly, I believe the perception of the majority will be is that now is therefore private and not available for them, and they would feel uncomfortable in using it. The future of the reserve is something the council needs to think about as a bigger picture issue going forward. And I guess it's one of those things where the drone photographs and the other photographs on the top of the site actually show that it's probably a fantastic recreation reserve to have that probably not enough people in the community know about.
That's right, and it is, and you could form a link track along the top of that, along to that power station at the other end, and there are some great views at the top, hence why, we're trying to develop that top piece. But, it's really, public aren't going to use it until they've got a formed access up to the top. So if there's some way we can, signage it that it is a, I suppose the other option is forming it to a legal road standard for 3 lots and giving it a street name. Therefore, it's, mind you, you're not going to be vesting it as road, it's reserved, but that would, if it had a street name on it and had the appearance of a legal road, that wouldn't stop people going up it and deeming it to be like a right-of-way, would it?
Possibly not, but I'm sure from your experience that there's still that perception to work through, and design may be able to fix that, of course. I'm just simply making that observation and saying that that is the difference. And I think in terms of 17.1 of the Reserves Act is the public's freedom of access, and the appearance of that providing a right of way does, I think, potentially has the potential to restrict the public's freedom of access. And it's
Neil, if I can comment.
Yeah, Don.
Surely we're talking about perception, which is something that is in someone's head. If we've got fact in front of public saying public access, does perception not then go out the window?
Yeah, but you still can't take away from the fact that you have got a section of that recreation reserve that is no longer for the public to be available to recreate on. In simple terms, of what the reserve's there to provide.
It is. It's still public land. It's still recreation reserve, and all a right of way does is allow the section owners to go up and back it. There's no way that it creates or restricts any public use of that land.
We don't have to agree. The view I'm taking says that by forming it into an access way, it does.
Yeah. If I can just make a comment too. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Stuart.
So I was just going to say, I suppose when we look at the, when we look coming back into the RMA, we're not dealing with the RMA, but your assessment of effects, you've got minor effects, and then you keep doing the same thing, and you've got an accumulative effect which grows. When you look at the overall size of the reserve and you look at the area that we're actually proposing to build the right-of-way on, you could argue, does that materially affect the reserve? And the answer would be, well, I think would be no, because it's such a small portion of the reserve. It's on the cold south-facing side. We've kept it as close to the boundary as possible. Is it affecting the public's use and enjoyment of the reserve? And I'd have to kind of say no, because the enjoyment of the reserve is at the top on the sunny side looking down over the river. So on that basis, I think we do meet the requirements. Well, that's my point of view, but I think we can meet the requirements of that section in the Reserves Act.
Yep, no, I take your point, Stuart, thank you. Other panel members, any other questions?
No, not from me.
Martin?
Thank you.
Linda, are you there?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Cool. Ordinarily in a resource consent hearing, we would then go to the author of the report and the basis that they may have some issues they want clarified from what they've heard from the applicant and the submissions that have been made or out of the questioning, and the process works by which you may have a question or want to clarify something, and you're deemed to be asking that question through me. So just to give you the opportunity to did you have any questions or any clarifications you required, or are you happy with what you've heard?
I think I'm reasonably happy at this time.
Cool, thank you. Righto, so Don, from here we now move and I'll talk to our submitters to hear from them and see what they have to say. So can I start first with, and then Don, after that we will come back to you to have a right of reply and make any final observations or comments for us to consider before we adjourn the hearing. So can I go first to Bert Kemp? You're there, Bert. What would you like to say in support of your submission that you made?
Well, what I would like to say is that the drainage issue has been glossed over by the proponents. It's an old creek bed that runs through there, and somewhere along the line, the pipes that have been put in have not taken all the water. That issue is still there, and if they are going to put more drainage from the driveway down into that pipe system, it's not going to make any difference at all to the road as far as we're concerned, because that issue is still there. It arrived in 2018 when there was a lot of work done to try and fix the drainage of Insklu Road. It never seemed to work because the Insklu Road still floods up there under a heavy rain. That's about the only thing that I can think of, is that the water that's coming through and down our driveway, which also carries the sewerage line from a large part of Bridge Hill. It's pipe work that's in there now is not picking up that water that's coming down the road, and it is still an issue. It has happened again. It hasn't stopped when they fixed, or so they tell us, fixed the drainage out of the dam up the hill. Well, that's about all I can say at the moment. Thanks.
Thanks, Bert. I guess your submission and the observation you just made then seemed to focus on the impacts of the drainage of the stormwater side of things.
Yes.
And do you have a view in relation to the impact on the recreation reserve itself by having a right-of-way over it? So taking aside the technicalities, if you like, of the impact of getting rid of stormwater, did you have any particular view in relation to allowing a right-of-way over the recreation reserve?
No, I have no view on that.
Okay, thank you. That's good. Thank you. Questions from Stephen or Martin? Any?
Not from me. Yeah.
Thanks, Stephen. Martin?
Aye.
Cool. Thank you, Bert. If you just stay on the line, we'll now go to Stu Millis. Are you there, Stu?
Yes, I am. Yes,
okay.
well, okay, supporting what Bert has said, I had done a little bit of research, and there was an old gold mine. I've seen photos of it at roughly Galilei Way. There must be water coming out of there along Earnestcleugh Road. Now, that subterranean water has got to go somewhere. Back in 2018, Bert and I submitted to the council, or wrote to the council, telling them not to dig up that drainage. They wanted to make the pipes bigger, saying that the bigger pipes would stop flooding on Earnestcleugh Road. We said that your problem is your mud tanks on Earnestcleugh Road, not the drainage. Leave the drainage alone, it's working fine. But no, the council had to go and dig it up and put different drainage, and they didn't make it deep enough, and is not catching all the water. And it did stop, all of a sudden stopped some months ago, maybe 2 months ago. And then on the 6th of April, it started again on that one day, running flat out. And then the next day it stopped. I believe that road is starting to move again, and that the works that they put in 2018 is not catching all the water, and that's why the road is moving. This can, in the future, the subterranean water coming along Earnestcleugh Road and down Poplar Grove Road may cause a future cost to the ratepayer, and it needs to be sorted out now before any more work is done. I believe the major cost of it should be met by the council and not by the developer. Don Sparks has a good reputation in this town for doing things properly. I consider that most of the cost should fall to the council to fix their problem that they created, and that a drainage engineer should be employed to sort it out. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Stu. So again, your issue is more around the infrastructure issue and performance or lack of performance thereof, and you have no particular view, then I take it, in relation to actually putting a right-of-way on the recreation reserve.
No, I don't have a view on that.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Martin and Stu, just checking, I'm assuming that you'll have no questions for Bert or Stu.
None.
Thanks, Stephen. Martin?
Nothing from me.
Nothing from you. Linda, just back to you. I'm assuming that you'll have no questions either for Bert or Stu.
No, I have no questions.
Cool, thank you. Righto, so just checking with where I've got to. I think, Don, at the stage now, having heard from you and then heard from the submitters and understanding where their submissions are coming from, which is quite clearly from an infrastructure issue as opposed to the right-of-way issue on the recreation reserve. Have you got any particular comments, having heard what everybody said, the questions you've been asked? Is there anything else you'd like now to add in terms of your opportunity to exercise a right of reply?
Really, just to say, Neil, that that Bert and Stu really are saying that they have no objection to the right-of-way in terms and to that development in terms of drainage or water off the reserve or the right-of-way or the houses to be built. Stuart would talk about that better than I can, but clearly the development would make that drainage better rather than worse, and better is always helpful. So Stuart might be able to comment on that, but apart from that, I haven't got any other comments.
Thank you, Stuart. Do you want anything to help Don's right of reply?
As Don iterated, it appears the submitters, the only council have put it out for public submission. The only submitters were the three regarding the stormwater issues. None of them seem to have an issue with the actual granting of the right-of-way easement. So in effect, there's been, even with public notification, as far as the granting of the right-of-way reserve, we can deem that to be no objection. The only thing that seems to be holding it up is just that interpretation of the I'm just trying to find the right page here.
It's all right. I know what it's like.
I got pages and pages spread over my messy desk. I'm sorry. But yeah, basically those sections of the Reserves Act, Section 48. The public enjoyment. Are we materially affecting the public enjoyment of the reserve? And it appears to be council's main hang-up is that public perception. As soon as we form that right away, that it appears to become private. I think we can get around that by adequate signage, and I think from a ratepayer point of view, putting in at the developer's cost an access way, and even a look at a seat at the top or something. It's not going to affect the subdivision. I've talked to Don about that, but it's a real, it's something for the public to enjoy. It's making use of the reserve. Where the right-of-way is proposed to be situated, being on that old south face, it's unlikely to ever be used for anything else. But we haven't got a crystal ball. We don't know what, as you say, if you come up with a management plan, what's proposed there. But it's very unlikely to be used for anything else. That portion that we're wishing to use. So I think that's about all I've got to say. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Listen, one of the things, a lot of this is, for me, I think it's going to come down to our analysis of the Reserves Act, and the reference that Don made to Section 48.3, which simply says that subsection 2 shall not apply in any case where, and that's simply, as Don said, is about notification. So if the application you had before us wasn't going to material alter or permanently damage the reserve, then we wouldn't have had to notify it, and that's all that was saying. So I think that that having notified under Section 48.2, that you're still left with that material alteration of the rights and the permanent effect of granting the easements is I think the key thing that this panel needs to work itself through. That's going to sound terribly legalistic, but in reality, just like in the RMA, and as you well understand, Stuart, that's what we're going to have to work through. And I'm not going to say that necessarily leads to what people might see as being the logical or right or common sense decision. My observation before that a reserve management plan would be really helpful in this process because it would give us some clear guidance about what the reserve was used for. Because you could even ask the question saying, well, is that southern end of the reserve actually required because of the exact reasons you've pointed out? It's not actually serving. Is it serving any useful purpose for people recreating? I leave those thoughts and observations with you as we will head towards our deliberations. But first of all, I ask Martin and Stephen, have you got any final questions or comments?
No,
Martin?
The only thing I'd say is that you're quite right in saying that with no management plan, we have to look at what the Reserves Act says can and cannot happen. And also the case of, and I'm going to pronounce this in Opa, Mr. Schmuckener's boatyard, which has been cited as in the officer's report about the precedent that appeal to the Environment Court led to, that decision. So I suppose we have to be mindful of case law also.
And that's why I made the observation that sometimes the law and the legal aspects you have to look at don't necessarily result in decisions that otherwise people think are sensible or right. Stephen, anything to add?
I'm fine, thanks. I've got a good understanding.
Cool. Don, are you back online again?
Yes, I am.
So with where we're at now, what we do is we'll adjourn the hearing and then we do our deliberations in a closed meeting that follows this one, and then we come back to you with your with the decision. So hopefully, well, I'm sure that you feel that you've had a fair hearing, and we have the unenviable task now of trying to apply the Act in the appropriate way, given all the hurdles that it places for us to consider your application. So with that, I can say the decision of the panel is reserved. The formal decision will be available in writing, will be available within the statutory period of 15 working days, if in fact that applies in this case, but I think it probably does. In the event that the release of the decision is delayed, the applicant will be advised of the delay. The hearing is now adjourned.
Now exiting.
Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you, Bert. Thank you, Stu. I think you're probably leaving now. Thanks.
Unknown participant is now exiting.
Mr. Corder.
Thank you.
Meeting's adjourned.
Great.
Thanks, Neil.
Thanks, Neil.
Yes, guys.
Neil, can I just grab you for a moment, please?
Yes, I believe so. Just wait for people to be
Stuart
leaving.
Calder.
Is now exiting.
And Steve's gone.
So it shows that Don's still here.
He's
He's
leaving.
Leaving.
Yeah.
Gone.
All of us.
How'd that go, Rebecca?
Yeah, I thought it went really well. I think some people had technical difficulties actually getting into the meeting, but it was really good to have that backup phone, being able to phone in.
Yeah.
You and I have both tried that on our personal devices, and it does take a bit of mucking around, but you can get there. So I suspect it's just their mucking around that's not worked particularly well.
Well, I think the good thing is they got a chance to say what they said, and that we heard from them pretty clearly. That seemed to work all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it went quite well in that respect.
Hopefully Sue stopped recording.
Yeah, well, she's gone, is she?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get her back on.
Yeah, cool.
Oh,
Come back,
yeah,
Sue.
not
Always forgiven.
recording.